Hello and thanks for tuning in. My name is Coach Pav and today I'm going to be discussing how decision fatigue is destroying your cycling performance. So obviously going to start with exactly what decision fatigue is. Now it's something that I've been hearing a lot more about in various blog posts, articles, you name it. I've been seeing it. It's a factor that is becoming really more talked about in general mainstream just health. I haven't heard anyone, no cycling coaches or anything, really discussing decision fatigue for cycling or cycling performance, but it's something that I'm sure is going to be picked up on really quickly. And if you've followed me and my content for a while, you'll know that I've been discussing this for a year or more at least now. So the bottom line, decision fatigue is simply the fatigue that you accumulate throughout the day through making decisions. Now I work with many athletes and many clients, many cyclists and different very other sports, and they all come from different backgrounds in terms of what they have to do, their commitments throughout the day, what their job is like, and how that affects them. Now, not to suggest that the people who I coach who have to make a lot of decisions, maybe that is CEOs and stuff like that, have more stress than my clients who are contractors or builders, carpenters and stuff like that. But the stress is different. The fatigue that they experience is completely different. Now, decision fatigue is a type of mental fatigue, and obviously the other type is a physical fatigue, which is very much similar to the stress that you put yourself under when you're training. So the way I like to describe it is that actually when you work a really physical job, actually you're tired. It's really acute. It's really quite obvious if you've had a big day, lugging around lots of wood or bricks or whatever it is you're doing, right? You really know you're tired and you know how that's going to affect you when you get on the bike and train. And my job is to make sure that the training is synergistic for these clients. Now, the other side of that, the mental fatigue with the CEOs, the people that are at desks, massive high pressure, high profile jobs, lots of decisions, lots of stress and pressure, they actually don't necessarily notice that, and that can be quite a chronic fatigue that's been building up over a long period of time. And actually what is interesting is that sometimes it's harder for those people to actually even get on the bike before the contractors or the people with the physical job, even though when they get on it might be you might get going after a while. So discussing a few examples of where you might get decision fatigue from. Now, of course, there are some massive ones that you could be thinking of, such as talking about money, money, budgeting, buying a house, going to college, even with the expense of that, talking to your spouse or kids about, money, if you've got troubles with that, punishing children, stuff like that, even really to horrible decisions such as making end-of-life decisions and stuff like that for people that you love. Those are huge decisions that you would expect to weigh on you heavily and obviously contribute a huge amount of fatigue. Now, that's an extreme example that on a day-to-day basis you're going to have all of these massive amounts of different decisions that you make during the day. And I'm sure you can even think about this yourself. What to eat for breakfast? Who's going to look after the kids? What are the kids going to do today if they're not at school? What time of day to train? What route to take to work? What to wear in the morning? All of these things, they're all tiny decisions, but by the time you get to the end of the day, you might be really already quite mentally tired. And here's a little thing that we joke about a lot, right? Is about that when you're married or you've been with a partner or something like that for a long time, I'm sure you've had a situation where you can't decide where you want to eat, right? We've all done that, I'm certain. And that's a good example of how you've made so many decisions throughout the day that actually making something quite simple is really taxing. And it can be, quite catastrophic in some senses. And I'm sure that you've probably noticed exactly right now how this can negatively affect your bike performance. Because if you're already suffering with this kind of mental blockage, that getting on the bike and putting in an intense effort or something like that can actually be quite challenging. And even if you can get on the bike and you can do that session, actually is it the right thing to do? Because you could be contributing even more stress, even more fatigue, that actually you're just not going to recover anyway. So the two ways in which I work with my clients in terms of actually making sure that this isn't affecting them are reduce or cope. Go through reduce first. Now this is the one where you've got to think about how can you remove or reduce the amount of decisions that you're making. Now some of these are super simple. For example, I talked about kids and what they're going to eat, what they're going to wear, what they're going to do during the day. At some point in their life, I'm sure they're going to be able to make these decisions for themselves. Of course, they might not be ready for you right now, but they might be at an age where actually you could start to give them some responsibility. That might be really good for them. I'm not going to tell you how to parent. I'm just spitballing in case you're actually not thought of this yourself. But also think about if you've got a job and you're making all these decisions, can you delegate? Can you actually get rid of some of the decisions that you have to make on a day-to-day basis? And will that actually help you make a lot less? Can you simplify some of your decisions? Right? We don't necessarily need to be making the same decision every single day. Can you wear the same clothes every day? Steve Jobs was renowned for the fact that he wore the same clothes. I'm sure they're not the exact same clothes, and nor do you need to be doing that. But can you make sure that you have everything already lined out for you and you know what you're going to wear? Once you've laundered it, once you've cleaned it, can you match it there and then? Do you have a house cleaner that could do that for you and they can just put it away for you? If you do, fantastic for you. But just think about how all these little decisions that you make. Can you meal prep for like a week's worth of food between you and your family? And then that way you don't have to think about what you're going to eat for dinner. It's simple stuff like that. Eat the same breakfast every day. It doesn't have to be identical. You could make something slightly different. But really focusing on making these simple decisions and simplifying big decisions into simpler ones might actually make a heck of a big difference for you. And the other one I talked about was coping with these. So this is where you can't necessarily get rid of all your decisions. So how can we make it easier for you to make them? Now, timing is pretty much the essence of this part. Now, you've got 3 ways in which you time in: your big decisions, your small decisions, and your training. And what I mean by that is we know from science that endurance training suffers really badly when you're mentally fatigued. Like all the studies point to, when you have mental fatigue, endurance training such as steady state, even base work and sweet spot efforts, FTP efforts, stuff like that, they really don't work well when you've got any sort of mental fatigue, including decision fatigue. So if possible, bringing that training forward is actually going to make it a lot easier for you. Similarly, we know that actually high explosive efforts such as gym work or even sprints, they don't tend to be affected by mental fatigue. And you might have already clicked with that, is that you might have had a really hard day and be really mentally tired, but actually able to smash a set of really high intensity intervals. So you might see in that sense that you could time your training around what you have to do during the day. And that's another big part of how I work with my athletes and my clients, is that when do they place this session during the day that is going to be best for them. So the other 2 factors that I mentioned were when you make these big decisions or small decisions. Now, some of you may have already figured out that actually there's a best time in the day for you to be making these decisions. Big decisions such as buying a house, getting a mortgage, talking to your partner about something really stressful, ending a relationship, firing someone, quitting a job. They're best made. The decision to do that is best made in the morning when you are fresher. You're going to make a better decision in the morning when you do that. And of course, we then look at what those smaller decisions are, such as what you're wearing tomorrow, what are you going to eat the next day, what route are you going to take. Any little decision, you can leave those to later in the day and get them ready to reduce the pressure on the next day itself. So it takes a little bit of foresight and thinking and planning, but actually when you really start to kind of look at your day in this micro fashion, it becomes really easy to see how you could simplify a few things that will actually alleviate some of the mental stress, mental fatigue that you're building through making decisions, and thus actually quite dramatically increase your cycling performance. So yes, there might be a reason why we're not really talking about this in the sports science or coaching community right now, because it can be quite a small gain, and it doesn't necessarily affect everybody, especially if you're lucky enough to be in a job where you don't make decisions and you can just go through your day without having to do that. You might not necessarily have that much mental fatigue. But hopefully what you're going to take away from this is an understanding of, if you do have to make decisions, even if they are infrequent and quite small, what you can do to actually help be a stronger cyclist. All of these little things, if you read or listen or watch any of my content, you'll know that if you start to make these small changes, they will make a massive difference when you accumulate them to your cycling performance. Of course, I couldn't end a video on mentality without mentioning my favourite way to improve your mentality, and that is meditating. And meditating, mindfulness, gratitude practices, stuff like that are going to change not just your cycling performance, but your general life. And the way they'll do that is they'll help you be really mindful around exactly what emotions and thoughts are coming up. And especially like when we talk about the common decision about where to eat with your spouse. I mean, how many people have arguments where they look back the next day and they're like, why were we arguing about that? That's ridiculous to even think that we're getting an argument. And that's just because you're both tired from, all the stress of the day that you haven't been able to make a decision. What meditation will do after a long time, it's not a quick fix obviously, but after a long period of time, you're going to be able to catch yourself before reacting when those emotions and thoughts come up. And the same is that the reason that helps your cycling performance is that you're going to be able to identify when it is good, when you're able to start training, what is a good time of day to train. Most people are terrible at actually being mindful around, should they train on their bike, should they do the prescribed session. If you're not being coached and you're not talking to your coach on a daily basis like I work with my clients, you're left a lot to make your own decisions. And if you're already tired, you're probably going to make a bad one. So the ways to do that, if you're going on your own, definitely meditate. And if you need help, definitely work with a coach who's going to spend the time and really communicate with you. And hopefully that has made a great deal of resonated with you. And I'd love to hear from you. And reach out to me, leave me a comment if you're on YouTube. If you're on my blog, you can check out all my other content and send me a message to have a chat. I'd love to hear from you all, and it's always a pleasure to have a little discussion about how you can fit this information in around your life, because that's a big part of what I talk about in my coaching, is making the training synergistic with your life. So thank you for tuning in. Like I say, there's loads of references to this, there's loads of science on this. So if you're on my website, read the blog below. It will be linked in there. And if you're on YouTube, check out the description where I will link in further resources there. So thank you. My name is Coach Pav, and have a great day.